you've got these three guys who aren't going to give up, even if they should. And that's what I thought in my mind was, I just hope we don't get in a situation where one of these guys shouldn't continue on.
It's impossible to swim around Islay. You have to understand what Islay is, okay? If you look at all the islands on the west coast of Scotland, they're basically rocks in the middle of the ocean. And the kind of rock that can survive that environment is a really tough, less favorable agricultural environment. Islay's got 8 functional distilleries. Why does one island have 8 functional distilleries when, you know, Arran has one, Jura has one, Skye has one? So when I start going on to like, what is the land like? It's a rough, treacherous sea, and at the heart of it, it's almost like this sacred, special place that can sustain life. The water around it protects that. It maintains that integrity, that like, it has to be like far away and difficult to get to, otherwise everybody would get there.
The idea to swim around Islay Scotland started to take shape all the way back in 2013. And I decided I wanted to swim the length of the Bronx. And so I swam the Bronx River, which was just about 8 miles through the borough. Suddenly, from everything else I had done up to that point in my life, suddenly I was the guy who swam the Bronx River. And it was a few months after that, I made a rare venture to Twitter. And I saw that Simon Brooking, who is a global ambassador for one of my favorite whiskeys, Lefroy, had posted a question to the community, which was, where's the most interesting place you've had a dram of our whiskey? And I wrote to him, I had a dram right before swimming the Bronx River, and I attached a newspaper clip. He wrote back and he said, well, one day you should do a swim for us. And right there in that moment, it just, everything's clicked. I didn't know what it meant, I didn't know what the swim would be, but in terms of being an explorer, the idea that you could swim something that wasn't supposed to be swam was really peculiar.
That was actually at my birthday party that I first heard about the Great Islay Swim. We were making our way through a bottle of scotch, and Justin sort of offhandedly mentioned, you know, I was thinking about swimming around Islay. If he says he's going to do something, it happens. It may sound harebrained, it may sound crazy, it may sound like something that I would never think of doing. But if he says it's going to happen, it happens.
The first thing I did when I got to New York was meet Justin Fornal, and I got involved with the Explorers Club, and on one fateful day we're drinking Tanzanian convenience store alcohol, and we're smoking pipes, and we're whipping a Hungarian cowboy bullwhip. As we're talking, Justin brings up the idea of this swim. I love the water. I feel really comfortable in the water, I always have. In my day job, I work in the space industry, and so we've thrown a few events. Ardbeg has done some experiments on the International Space Station. And so we had woven Ardbeg into a few of our events. They'd sponsored them and given us some of their whiskey. I knew Islay whiskeys, and I knew Islay, the island. Justin comes up with this great idea to do a long-distance swim, something that's never been done before. For me, it was just the perfect storm, and I had to be a part of it. So let me help you. Let's put this thing together. I think it can be done.
I'll talk with a lot of people, and you know, once people get a few drinks in them, everything seems like a good idea. And the most wildest, outrageous expedition or activity you can engage in, everyone wants to sign up. But then the next day, once the whiskey wears off and everyone's back into their day-to-day life, you really separate who's really about it and who's not. And I recall meeting Chad Anderson, and he, not only was he interested in helping out with the expedition, but he said he wanted to swim beside me. And I said, wow, maybe it's time that I partner with people who have strengths that I don't.
I broke out some planning tools and started to do some calculations and said, you know, is it possible to do this? How long would it take? How much time do you have to take off? Is it logistically possible?
So here we are, we're pitching to all these different whiskey companies, hey, we want to swim around Islay, and we want to take a barrel, and we want to fill it up at the different distilleries. So of course, first off the bat, all these, everyone we're speaking to just is worried, of course, you're going to die. You're going to die, and our name is going to be essentially what paid for your death sentence.
I went on a scouting trip. And we had some preliminary discussions with distilleries, and it quickly became clear that if we didn't have boots on the ground, nothing was going to happen. It is a small island. There is a few thousand people that live there, and things happen on Islay on island time. If you're not out there talking to people, some people don't check their emails, some people don't answer their phones, so you need to go knock on their door to make things happen. I came away from that scouting trip actually feeling really deflated. Just did not get the response that we wanted. We came to a point where the distilleries weren't going to be the ones behind. You know, it was actually going to be hard enough just to get them to contribute the juice. It went through, I don't know, at least a year's worth of planning or something, and almost was on the verge of just, like, not happening. And so we came across Single Cask Nation, and they could not have been a better partner.
You see a smaller company like Single Cask Nation, the difference is that this small company didn't have this giant corporation, this big boardroom of lawyers who was looking at us as just an outrageous liability that didn't have a celebrity name attached to it. Well, if we're gonna have someone swim it, we'll have Brad Pitt swim it. Brad Pitt doesn't fucking swim. These were real guys. These were the fighters and the scrappers who could believe in guys like us and say, wait, guess what? This is my company, and I make the decisions. And I believe in what you guys are doing, and I'm gonna get behind it.
So when they got on board, this thing became really real. And I had only tried to swim a mile once before in Boy Scouts when I was a kid. I didn't make it.
If this was gonna happen, we were gonna do it in July, and we were only about 6 months out. And we hadn't really been training up to this point. I mean, we're both, fit individuals, but we hadn't been training for this kind of big open water swim.
So my first open water swim was in the Bronx around City Island. It's 4.5 miles, and this was a test of not only our physical abilities, but also our mental and planning abilities.
When we got in the water at City Island, Chad looked overmatched. He made the mistake of having a bottle of Gatorade. It didn't agree with him. So he's puking, he's swimming, he's puking, he's swimming. And I thought, what the hell is he doing here? That was all in the first half mile.
I was so exhausted that I couldn't get out of the water onto the dock. I couldn't even physically pull myself up. I had nothing left. And so the team had to reach down and pull me up.
4 miles later, he's still plugging away like the Energizer Bunny. And there was nothing that was going to stop him.
Thinking about how far we had to go and how 4.5 miles was only a small piece of the 100-mile coastline we were about to swim around. It also gave me hope that I could do it. I mean, if I could swim 5 miles, then I could swim 10 miles. It gave me hope that I could take the next step.
The training that went into it was I'd swim 2 miles every day in a pool, and then once weather got a little warmer, we started doing a 10-mile open water swim every weekend.
Sometimes training, we would swim 6-8 hours a day. You'd travel out to where you were going and you would spend the entire day swimming.
It was only a few weeks before we left, heard talk, there's a gentleman who was another whiskey ambassador who's interested in joining the swim. And
Johnnie Mundell. He comes from out of nowhere. Well, this thing is actually happening. And Johnny, he'd really like to come.
I know the waters around Islay. I know the temperature, I know the conditions, and I've been on boats and gone around the coastline of Islay. And I just heard 2 Americans were going to try and swim around Islay. And my initial reaction to that is that's goddamn impossible. There's no way to do that. Especially not for 2 Americans just walking in like, no offense guys, who the fuck are you that you think you can come and do this?
he said, oh, Johnnie Mundell, Johnny the Scot, he's great. He's a big open water swimmer. He's interested in doing a bit of the swim with you guys. I'm just really thinking about the safety and the logistics. And I said, if he's swimming at a different speed, we're gonna need another kayaker. So I'm trying to compute all this. And I get on the phone with Johnny and we have a good conversation. And he said, he's done some swimming. He just wants to do a little bit of the journey with us.
He brought an energy that we just had no idea that we were missing. We could have done the swim, but it would not have been the same. On a practical note, he made it come together in so many ways. Anytime we ran into trouble and we needed a loud Scottish accent, Johnny came to the rescue.
When you're planning an expedition is making sure that the personalities gel. And one thing I told everybody who we were about to bring out, I said, if you're not in the water, your most important contribution to this expedition is your energy. And if you bring bad energy, you're detracting from the expedition.
You immediately put yourself in a situation where your morning doesn't look like any other morning. And I love those days. I love those days when I don't know exactly where I'm going to. And everything about the journey to Islay that day was unlike any other journey that I'd been on.
So just north of Islay is what is one of the largest, most feared whirlpools on the planet. And legend had it that witches would go to this whirlpool, 1,000 years ago, and they would wash their flannels in the moving waters. And these mystical waters would empower their clothing and give them the ability to fly. So as soon as we got Johnny off the dock, we went over to Corryvreckan, and I had a special list from this witch, special rules to follow to get approval from the ancient Celtic spirits that were there. And the first thing we had to do was we'd have to face north. And we'd have to strip down, the three of us, strip down all of our clothing, and then cover ourselves in bear grease, which is essentially bear fat. And then we'd have to jump in the water and swim towards the whirlpool. What kind of these ancient warriors would do is create this astrophysical microspace where they'd cover themselves before battle in bear grease and have a mock battle. And it was almost creating this kind of a time warp in sense where they were playing out the events that would happen. So they'd have a mini mock battle. So essentially what we were doing was having a mini mock swims, and that represented what would happen over the week to come. Johnny took a bottle of the Bomor 18 and he poured some of it to the spirits in the whirlpool. We also took a bag of items that were important to ourselves, important to our friends, and we dipped those in the whirlpool. And if we were successful, we believed that these items would hold the power of our swim and the power of that whirlpool.
My aim was to get in the water on day one. I'd examined the route. I would swim from Ardbeg to Laphroaig. I knew I could do that.
The water was shockingly cold, and it was one of those things where you'd get in the water and you knew you had to swim, you knew how to go, so you just jump in. But it was so shocking. For like the first 20 minutes, I would just swim as hard as I could, just to kind of get to temperature. And then after 20 minutes, okay, things are moving, things aren't cramping.
Totally unexpected. How clear it is. Crystal clear. Like, who would have thought that you get into the Atlantic Ocean off of Scotland and you can see down for 30 feet?
So you've got a piece of water that is roughly 2 feet deep, and then you've got kelp, ribbons of kelp that just go down into dark, dark, deep water. And a lot of people don't like that feeling of touching your body. I felt like I felt like there was life force coming up out of those plants. And it was magnificent. The colors were just spectacular.
The second day we started, we left from the beaches of Laphroaig, and Single Cask Nation had this whole group of whiskey tourists who had accompanied them on this journey and were essentially there to drink and watch our voyage. And I just remember, it's probably not the smartest thing to do, but we started out the day with just trays and trays of whiskey. And I knew that would be part of it, and it was one of those funny situations where, okay, of course I'm not going to drink on the swim. Of course I have to drink on the swim. That's what we're here. That's who we were, the whiskey swimmers.
Day 2 swim was a swim. We're aiming for the American Monument. And you start thinking about then again the dynamic of what this water is. The American Monument's really, really important. Like, ship went down there, people were killed, it speaks to the danger in that water. I kept up with the swimmers, and that really blew my mind.
Our captain, Captain Gus, let us know that, hey, we're about to turn in. I look towards the shore and I see this cave. There's all these majestic caves lining the shore that you just imagine being filled with broken up ships and treasure. And I saw this one cave that was in the shape of a heart. And I was just swimming towards the heart, and we ended up in there, and within there was this kind of little tidal lagoon.
We jump in there, we're sitting around, and I think we were all just a little stunned. One, at the scale of what we'd just done. I realize now the other swimmers were probably looking at, oh my God, look what it took to get to here, and we need to do that how many more times?
The third day of the swim was a life-changing swim. And this is this large, channel that goes from the American Monument to Port Nahaven. And I remember looking at the map, and that was always the spot of my nightmares and my dreams.
One of the many, many moments on the swim where you're facing your inner monsters.
You've got this deep, dark channel of water with bright sunlight. It created a cosmic effect in the water. As you looked down, you were aware that you were staring into an abyss, but the way the light was picking up fragments in the water, it sparkled. The colors represented the same feeling of tripping as we were going through the swim. And it was like the delivery. It was like it was outer body, out of mind, but it was all real.
It was almost became psychedelic. And I remember the water coming down so hard on my head that I could hear bells. And you got in this rhythm with the water smashing against you, and you're smashing into it, and you're looking down, and you can see thousands of these white little jellyfish that looked like the night sky.
Now, I would estimate the water that day was between 50 and 51 degrees. To cross that channel, to experience the temperatures that we did that day, that took everything I had. I was this close to quitting.
I was truly a creature out of my natural environment. I'm a land mammal. And it was such a strange, ancient realization. By the next day, I didn't feel that anymore. By the next day, the metamorphosis had occurred to where myself, and I believe the other swimmers, we were amphibious.
It felt like a deep inner mind experience.
Day 4 was, we were finally addressing the west side of the island.
This was a really interesting one from a planning perspective. Because if you do any research, you'll see that there's all kinds of signs and things and warnings that say don't swim here, the tide will take you out and drown you. There's lots of skulls and crossbones types of things.
It's one thing about Cus's boat is it's incredibly powerful, and it's really built for speed and efficiency in this situation. It's an adventure boat, essentially. He was so effective because he could get to any of us if we were in trouble in snap of a finger.
That Gus was the person that was in charge of the whole project. When we were ever on the water, Gus was the boss.
He planned every single swim we did to the minute, because the currents and the tides are so powerful around Islay that as soon as they change, whatever you were doing with the benefit of that tide and that current is over. And you could get pulled into the rocks, you could get pulled out to sea.
You can barely see where you're going. It's just a tiny speck on the horizon. And if you turn back, you can barely see where you came from.
But that was the first day I took Justin and Chad seriously. First day I took the whole swim seriously. Because day 4, you're like, we've done half the island. And you felt the change in the mood on the island. Because suddenly the swimmers weren't just a bunch of Americans that thought they could come here and do something that was not possible.
We heard a couple of days ago about the swim. I think it's fantastic what you were doing, and unbelievable that you run round Islay, especially the west coast of Islay, and which is rough. But aye, so this is the first I've heard people swimming round Islay. Fantastic.
Oh, I remember hearing about this man 4 years ago, when I was working at Lefroy, and they said he wants to swim round Islay, and everybody said he's mad. Do not touch him with a barge pole. And then last year he just popped up again, and I thought, yeah, wow.
And what I'll say is, respect is something that is earned, it's not given. And these guys earned it. They got the respect, they did well. I take my hat off to them, 100%.
I knew we'd all have a bad day. And for me, that was the 5th day. And I was cold before I got in the water. I was tired before I got in the water.
It was challenging changing direction when we come to day 5. And suddenly Gus was like, no, we can't do the north today. And moving down to the southeast corner and going counterclockwise was one part. We were also fighting horrendous weather conditions for the first time. It was like being in quicksand. We weren't moving, and mentally, it was just, I think it broke us all.
There's nothing more demoralizing in life than swimming your heart out, hard as you can, and looking up at the coastline and seeing that you're going backwards.
About every hour, the boat would come up. They'd give us goo, they'd give us hot tea or coffee, kind of check in on you. And I always thought the next time the boat came up would be the end of the swim for the day. And it just never was.
Wasn't fun. There was nothing fun about that day except finishing.
Little mantras that I was just playing around with. I might say raw power 1,000 times. See, I'm going to say raw power 1,000 times in my head. And that's going to give my body what it needs to go on.
Well, my responsibilities were for the well-being of the swimmers, of course taking care of any severe trauma that may occur, but I knew that part of my responsibility would be hydration and nutrition. The three worst things I worried about was drowning, being pulled away in a current and actually having an event where they're underwater and needed CPR. The next was boat props or extremely sharp rocks. So we have bandages that have blood clotting agents in the bandages. You pack wounds. And then I worried about allergic reaction, and jellyfish is a big concern. So you had like environmental issues, medical issues, and trauma issues. Chad had the biggest injury, I think, was the swelling of the feet. The edema was a lot, and it was in pain, so I did some pressure bandages on that. Normal type ACE bandaging, each toe at a time. And he just pushed through, Advil for everybody, of course, as needed.
So you get out of the water, you're broken and tired, torn up, and you've been drinking salt water all day. You swim, you organize, you go and eat, you get doctored up, and then you go on your email. The logistics of this thing were crazy. I mean, to this day, I say that the hardest part of the swim had nothing to do with the actual swim. It was getting the liquid in our cask. Coordinating with all these distilleries, with all the competing interests, with all the different people that we were talking to.
We all knew that after the west coast, the most dangerous coast was going to be the north. It's the most remote, the most cut off. And the force of water coming along the north of the island is really something. My point on knowing when to stop was we have one safety boat, a couple of canoes, and we have 3 swimmers. The moment I am drawing the safety element away from the group is the moment I'm going to decide to get in the boat and cheerlead.
Some of it I literally blocked from my memory. And some of the really hard days I did not remember.
I wasn't going to make it easy for anybody to back down, because I think they would regret it for the rest of their lives. And if it resulted in them being in a hospital for a month to finish the swim, fuck it. Better be in a hospital for a month than to spend the rest of your life saying, oh shit, I wish I just kept going.
The force. And you're just going with it. Really, in the North Shore, we were just being pushed along the North Shore.
I remember stopping at one point and realizing just how still the water was. And I stopped. The entire Atlantic was doing this. And it was like silver. And I've never seen anything more beautiful or serene in my life. I'll never forget that.
Swimming around Islay is impossible, with one caveat. Gus's understanding on how to make the tides work for us is why the swim happened.
When we reached the end of it, it was the first time Gus knew we were going to finish it. And I know that because this is the first time our captain, who's a salty, tough guy, broke out his own bottle of whiskey. And he poured for everybody. And he said, lads, you did it. And I said, shit, we still have 2 days. But what he meant was, he knew we could finish it. It was probably the greatest glass of whiskey I ever had in my life. Because here you are, your captain, this is his land. This is not our land. This is his home. These are his waters. He's pouring something that was a special bottle to him in our honor. It was that love of whiskey and brotherhood and friendship and hard work that everything we took to get to that moment, it was all encapsulated in one glass. We'll never be able to have that glass again as long as we live.
Day 7, we're going to run the gauntlet. And we didn't swim that day. We were blown through that channel. I think it was 12 miles and we did it in about 2.5 hours.
Some of the whiskey tourists came up and they said, we tried to see you guys swim and we got there and you went by like a boat. And that just shows that A lot of this swim came down to planning, Gus's planning, and him knowing those currents and us riding them when we could.
I was in the boat with John, and we were hooked up with Justin. And Justin, for the first time, was swimming faster than we could paddle.
I had this thing that I had invented where it looked like that was moving in slow motion. Well, I like to envision myself as a sea mammal, rolling over onto my side. It also gave me a really good way to breathe.
Well, the blonde torpedo, he had a particular stroke that he perfected on his own, I think, that helped his body from breaking down.
And that the reason that Chad calls himself the blonde torpedo is not anything to do with his physique. It's because of the way that he moves through the water with such incredible alacrity.
I was a spectacle on the trip. Every day they would get on, a new person would get on, and they would just be fascinated. What is this stroke, this open water stroke or whatever? And everybody'd be like, I don't know what he's doing, he made this thing up.
There was an unforeseen consequence. All that water being funneled into that one spot for the first time brought me personally into really close contact with a lot of jellyfish.
And of course the jellyfish hits with him was bad enough one time where I had to, I gave him high dose Benadryl, I flushed it with white vinegar, I wrapped him in one of our heat blankets.
I was stung from my nose, all across my face, all the way down to my navel. And when I got out of the water that day, I was talking absolute gibberish. I was not making sense, I have no memory of it.
And then afterwards, we went up to the docks of Bunnahabhain to pour in the contribution they had made into our barrel. My father and my sister were there, and it was great to have them together in a field with me. And, you know, it's one of those things, it's like almost like a childhood fantasy. I just remember looking at him and saying, it doesn't get much better than this. I kept trying to take snapshots with my mind so I could appreciate what was happening. We had worked so hard to get there, and like that, it's over.
On day 8, we thought we'd planned a short swim to come in and lap up all the glory.
We had this party planned at Ardbeg. They were making chili, and they were breaking out some great bottles, and it was just a swim that never ended.
I don't own a wetsuit. I didn't have the money to buy a wetsuit. And a wetsuit is a choice. Am I going to choose to fight the friction of the wetsuit, the abrasions that it's going to cause with swimming that many days consecutively, or am I going to choose to fight the temperature? I'm going to choose to fight the cold because I'm not capable of fighting the wetsuit.
So Johnny had special challenges because he did not swim with a wetsuit. So every day he was probably in, I would say every single day he was in stage 1 of hypothermia. And near the end he was doing some things that we've never seen him do before. He rolled over on his back, he kept stopping, and then when we pulled over the boat he was shivering, which is of course getting to stage 1. When he hung onto the boat, the whole boat was vibrating because he was shivering so bad. And he was just making no sense at all.
I was convinced, and I still am, that Johnny was slightly nuts. He would jump in the water, no wetsuit, and within the first 5 minutes of the swim, you'd hear him yelling, "Cold is just a state of mind."
The worst injury, I mean, if you looked at the other guy's necks, Justin's in particular, his neck looked like he'd been mauled by a tiger. And there was just flesh showing.
And it was a type of muscle rotation, chafing that I've never seen before, too. It was almost like muscle against muscle. He is a built swimmer's body, and the skin breakdown was unbelievable. It was right through the dermis, right down to the last layer of skin, almost at bleeding.
The whole thing ends where it began, on Ardbeg Pier, and it was a beautiful sight. Like I said, it took forever to get there, but that last little bit coming in was completely euphoric. To have the Single Cast Nation guys and all their guests there, to have people from the island, Angus's daughters were there playing pipes, the whole team from Ardbeg had stepped out and took care of everybody. There was a little party waiting for us on the pier.
So all the time that I was swimming, I was manifesting. I was manifesting that last day. I was manifesting swimming up to the dock, seeing my family there, and concluding this. That's what I used to get through each swim every day, was to visualize, looking down into this blank canvas of the abyss, seeing the things I wanted to happen.
The most important part of the trip was not only proving to myself that I could do it, but also the mental stamina and the mental hurdles that you had to cross to be able to pull something like this up.
I got out of the water and I was broken. I was immediately taken to the still house at Ardbeg, and standing between two stills that are going flat out, the heat alone was just incredible. It was a really moving experience.
What a debauched whiskey orgy that turned into. Bottles being poured into our cask, but bottles being poured into people's mouths. It was revelry, it was debauchery, it was bacchanalian. It was absolutely outrageous.
I took myself to the absolute edge of what I can accomplish as a human. It took everything I had to accomplish what we did. And I think I had 2 months of let's just say I wasn't in a great place for 2 months.
It was the strangest feeling. I just remember going and getting on the subway, walking up the street to the office, and just watching everyone, with their heads down, not interested, not happy, going to the office. And you come back to this. And I was just thinking, how to get back out on the water. To be perfectly honest, I didn't want to swim for a long time, but I want to do something.
I think it's like a musician being on tour. It's complete sensory overload, and then boom, you're pulled from that, and you're put back in kind of your everyday life. And you're back in the office, you're back wherever it is, and it can be very hard.
I got to be a man that I want to be, fighting against the earth that I love in the environment that means the most to me. But I'm also a dad. I'm also a husband. As far as future expeditions, I haven't figured out how to do both those things. And before I do another one, I have to get closer to understanding what that would look like.
One way I've always dealt with it is you start planning the next one before the one you're on is finished. And as crazy as it sounds, as I was swimming towards that dock and I could see my family and I was thinking about the week to come, I was already planning the next expedition in my mind. And in fact, I had started that probably halfway through the swim. So there was never a feeling of, well, as soon as I touch that dock, this portal, this strange mystical land I've been in with these great guys for the last week is going to close. No, this existence is going to open the next portal. This way there was never a drop. It was just always, it'll continue to be a rise, So it's like you always have to be a step ahead of your own mind. A lot of explorers, guys who have been up some really tough mountains and gotten to that peak. Yeah, you're at the peak of the mountain. Great. Congratulations. Now what?
It's all over. What can I say? It's been a fantastic week, fantastic company, good crack, enjoyed every minute. When are you doing it next?